Hello and welcome to Inside Update, brought to you by InsideInvestigator.org, investigative journalism to root out corruption in Connecticut. I am Connor Dragotis, and I am joined today by Mark E. Fitch, senior investigative reporter on our team, because we have multiple things to talk about today, not the least of which is a wildly successful and impactful investigation titled Unplugged, the $7 billion tax in your electric bill. And we're actually going to start with a story out of Middletown that you wrote about an alleged no bid contract, or I guess maybe it's not even alleged, but the
Yes.
investigation that is wanted is certainly setting off some fireworks. Middletown just seems like it continues to crop up here in our on our radar. So bring us up to speed. What's going on?
Yeah, a lot of stuff coming out of Middletown these days. Yeah, and it's not alleged. There was no bid on this contract. Basically, what happened, the city of Middletown has this building called the Keating Building. It's also known as the Remington Rand Building. But it used to be a former factory, and they've reconstituted it into a small business incubator. So, businesses can go in there and rent, space and all this kind of stuff. Um, and basically, for the first couple years, it was being run by some, town officials kind of on the side, like for very small amounts of money, $10,000 or whatever. But when former fire chief Rob Cronenberger retired, he set up an LLC and immediately contracted with the city to run the Keating building, to manage the Keating building. And it started out at like $36,000 a year. So it was a little more expensive. This contract was signed off on by the mayor and, the economic development director and I can't, like one of the, town attorneys or something like that. But it didn't go out for a formal bid. And that's against Middletown's own rules. And then a year later, they double the size of the contract. So now it's, $72,000 a year for doing the same job. Once again, didn't go before the city council, didn't go out to bid, same people signing off on it. And basically, like at the same time, Cronenberger is getting a pension from the city for his work as a career firefighter. So some people on the city's retirement board have questioned this, whether or not it's proper, whether or not it's, in line with the city's pension rules, along with whether or not it's in line with the bidding rules. Because, as far as we can tell, definitely not in line with the bidding rules.
Yeah.
The pension issue, different story. The city argues that he's technically an independent contractor. Some people on the pension board are arguing that's not really the case. So it's
Seems like
kind
kind
of
of
a
a loophole you could drive a bus through at the end of this, right? If you could just set up an LLC, why wouldn't everyone do this just to get around the pension rules, which is going to skyrocket costs because you're basically able to double dip to a certain extent or triple. Heck, why not set up three LLCs?
well, he's not getting benefits. That's one of the city's arguments is he's
Okay.
not getting
Okay.
benefits, so that makes him more of an independent contractor. And what kind of I find kind of fascinating about that whole argument is that Connecticut for years was really trying to crack down on the practice of independent contractors. They, arguing that like, oh, it allows you to skirt, employee protections and additional costs like unemployment costs and things like that. So it's interesting to see a more liberal use of independent contracting by a city as opposed to, what the state by and large has done over the past few years, which is try to limit independent contractors.
Right. Well, it seemed like there was also the argument that, the guy who has really been making some noise about this said that the city is providing Cronenberger with an office with electronic devices, a city email address. He has to get work approved by the economic and community development director. So he's making all of these points that, hey, this is basically employment.
Yep.
He is an employee in every other way except for the fact that it's not impacting his pension. But again, the town is is it poo-pooing it or just saying no, there is a, is it truly a legal argument that nah, that still doesn't hold up? I know that's getting into the weeds, but I do think
Yeah,
it's
no, they basically, they're not paying much mind to it. And, I'm working on a story. It'll be coming out in the next few days or whatever. It is really, this whole issue has spilled over and become personal for, some people, some fiery back and forth. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in Middletown surrounding the Keating building, in addition to many other things that we're hearing about. But yeah, I think at this point, the city says he's an independent contractor. This is fine, but they have yet to really address the whole bidding issue. I haven't seen that come up in the emails. Um, and as far as I know, the contract with Cronenberger is already up, and it doesn't seem like it's been extended. So who knows what's happening at this point?
interesting. Yeah, if they're stepping away, that could also be indicative of not wanting to open up a can of worms that lasts for any amount of time.
Or
Um,
if they're planning to put it out for bid, it's kind of this
yeah,
admission that you should have done it in the first place.
yep.
So
So I had one more question, and this will be the last one because I do not want to shortchange our time spent on Unplugged. But there was also some question about via FOIA, we haven't been able to determine who actually wrote the contract with Cronenberger and dig down on kind of the root cause of how this whole thing started too. Has there been any additional transparency that you've been able to get since this you've started looking into the topic?
no, no. I mean, I think what it basically comes down to is that, it's who you know, right? Cronenberger had worked there for a long time. They said, "Hey, why don't you, take over running this building?" And it all seemed probably fair, fair and good, and a couple handshakes. But you know, the problem is when there's not a lot of people watching, and people get very casual and lax in adhering to standards.
Yeah.
Uh, it can come back to bite them. And obviously, some people at the retirement board got you know a little fired up about this, and now it's coming back to haunt them. But yeah, it you know, no bid contracts are a big issue in the state now. And at the state level, and I'm sure at the municipal level. So this is an example.
For sure. And a great opportunity to send us tips about other no bid contracts you may or may not be aware of. Because if it's
Yeah,
not Mark, anyone on our team, I feel like seeing a tip about no bid contracts because it really does open up a can of worms in an interesting way. Let's switch over. Middletown, putting it off to the side, though this does also impact Middletown. You wrote a fantastic investigation called Unplugged, the $7 billion tax in your electric bill. And I'll say up front, you have already done multiple 40-minute radio interviews on this. So we're not going to get into the weeds quite as much as you did there because of our time restrictions. But this is a topic that impacts arguably every single person in the state of Connecticut. You did a wonderful job. You really provided details that I think a lot of people have been asking for. You've been working on this for months, but the publication timing really couldn't have been better as this whole thing came together because it is on everyone's minds. In case anyone has been living under a rock or just missed checking their electric bill over the last couple months here, bring us up to speed about what you saw and what you're seeing right now.
sure. So, I mean, everybody's upset that their electric bill went up. It went up because of the public benefits portion of your electric bill. Public benefits are the cost that the electric company incurs due to government programs and policies. So legislature passes something, they want to do something, it forces the, utility company to do that thing, and they recoup their costs through you. So it essentially functions as a tax. And up until recently, it was a hidden tax because it just got rolled into your delivery charge. And the utility companies made a request to be able to separate out their bill and show everybody what they're paying for and where it goes. Um, And I think without that, there probably wouldn't be as much outcry as there is now, or at least it wouldn't be outcry directed at politicians. I think the utility companies, they are not saints. Obviously they charge money for what they do, um, but I think they were probably tired of being the punching bag for some of these escalating costs and things that get put on them as a matter of public policy. So anyway, everybody's really upset about the public benefits all of a sudden. A big chunk of it was paying for nuclear power. The smaller chunk of it was paying for the COVID era shutoff moratoriums that the government bureaucracy extended for like 4 years. Um, but we've been paying those public benefits for a long, long time. So I decided, it's like, well, let's go back 20 years and figure out how much the people of Connecticut have basically paid toward all these government programs and policies, this hidden tax. And it comes out to, I think, conservatively estimated about $7 billion. So that's, $7 billion that's gone out of the pockets of the people into government mandated programs and policies to do whatever it is that the legislature wants done when it comes to energy.
A lot of zeros. Uh, even
Yeah.
over 20 years, there's a lot of time. And I did appreciate too your approach. I mean, in journalism, we struggle with numbers sometimes, not in that we can't find reliable numbers, but in wanting to not overstate numbers, right? I think that happens a lot for clicks or, oh my gosh, look at how much money's been spent. And I think you did a really good job saying, no, I'm pulling this from multiple different places, double check all the numbers. Let's make a conservative estimate. And it just happened to work out. 7 billion is still a big number that you came out with. It wasn't, you didn't even need to, stray into any ethically questionable area to make a really compelling argument that, man, there's a lot going on here that needs to at the very least get a better understanding by the people who are paying these bills. And I think that was probably one of the biggest things is, this outcry has come because of that lack of transparency and the lack of ability. Hey, I got my electric bill. It's higher, it's lower, whatever. Man, I should have unplugged my microwave on the first of the month. Like, I don't, people are looking around trying to figure out what's going on, but there has not been a lot of transparency. So I think you do deserve credit for taking these steps and, quite frankly, engaging the right people uh, to give you the, pull back that curtain a little bit. Um, I've been amazed by the number of people who are reaching out to us, who are commenting, who are just they're really upset by what's going on. And our job isn't to tell anyone how to respond, but it is nice at least to see that when we put out reliable information, there is all of a sudden this awakening, this cracking moment of, hey, I actually understand my bill a little bit better. And whether you're happy or not about that, I think it is a win just on that front.
Yeah, and I think what people have to take into consideration is what you're paying for. One of the things that I did, I compiled, Eversource did a 20-year look back on public benefits charges for the average residential customer. I used those numbers, to compile their portion of the public benefits. They're obviously the much larger company. And then I looked at a Pura filing for United Illuminating that covered 2004 to 2019. That's where I got their numbers. So it all kind of worked together. I calculated the numbers for a specific year, 2020, and you were looking at about $530 million that year coming out of ratepayers' pockets to fund these government programs. But I think the bigger thing that people should look at is, if they're upset about their bill and things like that, is what are you paying for? And really what we as a state have been pushing towards is emission-free, carbon-free, renewable energy. And I got to say, most of the programs go towards that. Whether it's the Millstone deal with the nuclear power plant, this power purchase agreement that made up about 77% of the cost increase this past July. You know that the state entered into that contract because they wanted emission-free, reliable energy. They didn't want the nuclear power plant to shut down, and that was a threat that was kind of hanging out there. But they want that emission-free, energy. They want, and they classify nuclear as renewable. You know, who knows? But then so much of the other costs are related to how we generate electricity in the region. So it's, solar. It's a lot of solar. It's, and now coming up, it's going to be wind. But we put a lot of energy a lot of money into these different programs. And so that has really been the push forward. And then you have, you know, a significant bit of your charge is, some of it goes directly to the state's green bank to support solar. And some of it goes toward, for the past 20 years, people are upset that they're paying the bills or helping pay for people who don't pay their electric bills. We've been doing that for 20 years, and all of this has been going on for years and years. Or energy efficiency programs, we pay for that. That's part of your public benefits charges. So a lot, these charges are really based around what Connecticut wants to do as, for energy infrastructure now and in the future. So,
Yeah.
if you want to change the energy infrastructure of an entire state or region, it's going to take time and it's going to take even more money. So,
It's interesting you say, when we talk about what Connecticut wants, that's it's an interesting phrase too. And I always, I try to identify a little more specifically, and I know it's a turn of phrase, so this isn't a knock on you, but seeing the outcry and the anger, frankly, over the last week or so with this, and then obviously this investigation, as I said, just happened to come out at the right time where this is far beyond our newsroom. But what Connecticut wants, I don't know if it's changing, but given new information, is really going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next year or so. Because I don't, though electricity has been a hot topic since we launched 2.5 years ago, it does seem that this has riled people up in a fairly unique way, at least compared to even the electric vehicle thing. People were not upset, about the mandated electric vehicles. This seems bigger than that, which
oh,
surprised me. But I do think that people are really going to
uh,
keep pushing.
yeah, the electric vehicle, debate feeds into this, because I mean, I still marvel when they're like, yes, we're going to make this big jump. We're going to end the sale of, gas-powered cars by 2035. Like that's what they wanted to do. And I was sitting there scratching my head, like, where are you going to get the electricity for that? I mean, you don't have the electricity that you need now. Where do you think you're going to get it? And I think that really contributed to the demise of that regulation, is that they had to look around and say, we don't have the energy for this. We don't have the infrastructure for this. This is actually going to be a much bigger issue than we thought. And so, yeah, and 10 years ago, Connecticut was really pushing natural gas, we wanted everything natural gas. We never actually devised the means to bring in more natural gas. Now we want everything to be electric, but we haven't devised the means to bring in more electricity. So it's supply and demand. The demand's going up, but not the supply. And so your costs are going to go up. And not only are your costs for the supply going to go up, but your cost for building out the things that you need as a state, to get that solar energy, to get that wind power, all that stuff, you got to pay for that too. So when you look at what the future is for the state and the region, everybody says that it's more electricity coming down the pipeline and everybody's going to need more electricity. But right now, we don't have the means to bring in more supply. So that is something that has to be addressed first before you can really electrify anything.
Right. Because you mentioned the Green Bank as well, I'll put in a shameless plug for another investigation that you did a couple months ago, looking at how, some of the Green Bank no bid stuff was happening, some of the questionable relationships happening in this electricity field generally, right? I mean, a lot of these programs have raised significant questions because, like the Middletown question, it really just hasn't been done either on the up and up or at least with enough transparency for informed decisions to be made. So, to all of you watching, listening, tuning in, insideinvestigator.org, search Green Bank up in the search bar and check out another really fantastic investigation by Mark there. Um, to put a bow on this, I guess, a little bit with the Unplugged investigation, I alluded to the fact that I don't necessarily personally believe that this conversation is going to be going away. It seems like Eversource is being a little more aggressive. I saw they put out multiple op-eds pushing back on a number of questions in the last couple weeks. If anything, this is escalating. Do you see any clarity or did you get any information that leads you to believe, I guess, what can we offer watchers or listeners here in terms of any transparency about the future? I know you said this is a 10-month uh, surcharge, so
Yeah.
any expectations before that runs out, or are we just in for this cycle over the next year?
You know, the 10 months will run. It'll go down. The Republicans have been calling for a special session. I mean, I don't see that happening, and it doesn't seem like the Democrats are really willing to do that. On the plus side, because it is now such a hot button political issue in Connecticut, I think we are seeing a moment where lawmakers in the future are going to think first and like, how is this, could this potentially come back and bite us if we implement this policy or this program? How is this going to affect ratepayers? And I think that there will be more concern among the legislature for how things are going to affect ratepayers. I mean, we saw just this past week, Governor Lamont supposedly walking away from this three-state, offshore wind deal. And there's a lot of speculation as to what that means, whether he's doing it as, kind of, playing politics, not wanting to enter into a power purchase agreement or, something that's going to raise the costs on ratepayers before an election. Maybe he'll come back around after the election. Who knows? But, when we start talking about wind power, those power purchase agreements are expensive. They are much more expensive than the nuclear ones. So, you can have wind power, but it does cost you. So it's not free just because the wind blows. You have to pay people, who are building it. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more reticence among lawmakers in the future as they move forward with new policies and programs, that they might not want to tack onto people's electric bill, because now there's a whole bunch of people out there that's just happy to remind, lawmakers like, hey, you did this. And so when it becomes a political issue is when it can become a little more, it's not hidden anymore. So it's out there and people are campaigning on it.
Well, I think everyone at this point knows how big a fan we are of transparency. So the more information that's out there, the better, and it tends to lead to better results. At the very least, it seems to lead to a reduction or end of corruption, which is, I mean, that's our wheelhouse, right? Like that's what we want. Anything that we can do to put a light on instances where things are not fully transparent, well, we're interested. Send those tips our way and help us help you, and we can move the ball forward that way. Any other notes from you? Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
No, but I just don't, your electric bill will go down a little bit and when this is all paid up, but I mean, don't expect it to go down, permanently.
Yep, for sure. For sure. Wonderful. Mark, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who is tuning in on YouTube, on podcast, on radio now, on Roku, on Amazon, on Apple TV. This show keeps appearing in new places. We're thrilled about it. If this is your first time here, welcome. Huge thank you for tuning in. We are a nonprofit newsroom, which also means that we survive and thrive by the generosity of donors who believe in our mission to root out corruption in Connecticut through investigative journalism. Check us out at insideinvestigator.org, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, be well, stay safe, and stay informed.